Okay, hang on a second. Hello? Okay. We talked about the functions of the kidney, yes? Okay, so what I want to do today is I want to concentrate on the functional unit of the kidney, which is, of course, what? The nephron. So let's take a little closer look at the inside of your kidney. And we'll get into this. So a brief review of the anatomy for you guys. We talked about the fact that any organ where major arteries or vessels, structures, nerves enter or leave an organ, that's referred to as the hilum of the organ. So in this case, you got your little hilum of the kidney right here. And then a couple of other anatomical features. The outer portion of any organ is referred to as what? The cortex. So you have the cortex of the kidney, and then you have the medulla of the kidney. And as you can see, and if you remember from general, the medulla of the kidney is kind of divided in these things that look like upside-down pyramids. So these are referred to as the renal pyramids. And then finally, you have what's called the calyx of the kidney, the cup of the kidney, and that's where the urine meets to talk about their day. And then, once the urine is formed, it will move from the kidney through ureters, through peristaltic waves, into the bladder. Your bladder fills up, and then you go pee. Are you with me? All right. Couple of things that you need to remember is that it is the arterial blood that is actually filtered by the kidney. And as that blood enters the kidney through the renal artery, you can see that it begins to branch off and it becomes smaller and smaller. Are you following this? Until it reaches the beginning of, the beginning of the nephron. And here's your little nephron right here. So this is where the rubber meets the road, ladies and gentlemen. And as you can see, you have these yellow little tubules. I like to call it the yellow brick road. Follow the yellow brick road. What? What? All right, who cares? All right, so watch. Get this idea now. The nephron is where the plasma of the blood is filtered, the watery part of blood. The big elements of the blood, red blood cells, white blood cells, albumin, should never be found in urine. If you have any of these, you got a problem. So the kidney does three things in order to make urine. The nephron accomplishes three things in order to make urine. Number one, it filters the plasma. And I use this example, and I'll use it again. If you're going to clean a closet, how do you clean it? You take everything out of the closet, and then you decide what you're going to put back in. You got me? So the job of the nephron is to filter all of the plasma. So it filters all the plasma, and then as that filtered plasma goes through the yellow brick road, the nephron decides what it's going to put back into the blood. You got me? So one of the processes that happens in the nephron is the plasma is filtered. Number two, Number 2, that comes after number 1. You should write that down. What is filtered then gets selectively reabsorbed back into the blood. Now, watch. You ate something this morning, drank something. It went from your GI tract, got absorbed into the blood. When that blood gets down to the nephron, it's going to get filtered out of your blood and then get reabsorbed back into your blood. So that's where they get the word reabsorption. And then the other function is the fact that some things in the blood that have to be gotten rid of cannot be adequately filtered by the nephron. So these guys have to be actively secreted. So they can't get filtered out, but you got to get rid of them. So you have to actively pump them out of the blood. And the things that have to actually get secreted from the blood into what's soon to be urine, these guys here, potassium, hydrogen, and creatinine. So watch. This is important. When the kidneys begin to fail, the first thing that begins to fail is its ability to secrete stuff that can't be filtered. That's why people in renal failure develop a metabolic acidosis, hyperkalemia, and their creatinine levels go up. What? So you know that firsthand? See? You think I'm making this stuff up? As far as you know, maybe I am. Tell me you followed this. You got this. Okay. So, watch. I'm going to be very general. Yeah? And I'm going to explain to you the different parts of the nephron and why they're important that you understand it. Then after I take you through a general overview of it, I'm going to be more specific in terms of what happens in each section. Yeah? All right. All right, so let's look at this for a minute. First of all, what's in the plasma of the blood? What's in it? What's in it? Good. Number 1, water. You don't pee dust most days. Number 2, what else? Why do they call it urine? You go, girl. There's urea in there, right? And then there's creatinine. And then there's, watch, sodium, potassium, calcium, magnesium. I could go on, right? Chloride. So the electrolytes. Now, there are also some small proteins that can actually fit through the little spaghetti strainer. And some amino acids, too. Right? And then there's glucose, yes. And then there's some bicarbonate. Bicarbonate can be filtered readily by the glomerulus, right? One of the things that can't be filtered are hydrogen ions. So the control of bicarbonate and the control of hydrogen ions is critical in terms of maintaining pH of the blood. And I told you this before, and I think it's worth repeating, is that any acid-base disturbance can be corrected by the kidney if you live long enough. And I explained that's why when people are in really, really bad shape, like they're septic, they're dying, doctors will put patients temporarily on dialysis, hemodialysis, to correct their fluid and electrolytes, and more importantly, try to maintain that pH of the blood. All right, so you will see people who are in the ICU. If they're in bad shape, the little dialysis person will come in there and dialyze them for a couple hours every day. Yeah, and then also there's some vitamins in there too, and those vitamins, they have to be reabsorbed. Another thing that's in urine is uric acid. Uric acid is a byproduct of DNA metabolism, so the nucleic acids. This is important when you talk about gout. That's why I bring it up. So those are the big things that we need to talk about in terms of what's in the plasma and what is ultimately in or going to be found in urine. All right, now, and you know, here's the thing, and I get it too, I do, right? People don't like the kidney. They don't. But if you're really going to understand how the body works and the importance of the kidney, you got to understand this guy right here. You got me? And if you do, your life will become, well, probably not much better. Could actually become worse. Maybe we should just skip the kidney altogether. What do you think? No? All right. So, watch. You learn this in chemistry. There's a unit called milliosmoles. Do you remember milliosmoles? Do you remember that? They opened up for Menudo at Summerfest, the milliosmoles. All I want you to know is that milliosmoles is a measurement of this thing that you don't like, osmolarity. And if you recall, osmolarity is the ratio of stuff to water. You got me? All right. So, and I'm just going to tell you this, and then I'll explain it hopefully a little better, that the osmolarity of the blood is about 300 milliosmoles. 300. All right. Now watch. What are arteries made out of? Please get this one right. That's very good. And what can muscle do? That's very good. So the sympathetic nervous system innervates vessels of the nephron. And it can actually control the diameter of these vessels. And I'll explain in more detail in a minute. So watch. Arterial blood from your body is going to enter the kidneys through the renal arteries. What happens to those renal arteries as they get deeper and deeper into the kidney? They terminate at the artery that begins the nephron. And because it's moving toward it, it's called the afferent arterial. Are you with me? The afferent arterial is under pressure. That pressure is produced by your systolic blood pressure. You got me? So as that arterial blood enters the afferent arterial, it will move towards this ball of capillaries called the glomerulus. And the glomerulus is actually, that's the definition, a ball of capillaries. But it's actually more porous than a normal set of capillaries. It's actually got slits in it called little fenestrations that allow more stuff to leave that glomerulus than a normal capillary would allow. Are you following this? You with me? So let's look at a little closer, simplified view of our little glomerulus here. Here we go. So if you look, this guy right here is the afferent arterial. And then this little loop here represents the glomerulus. So as arterial blood comes into the glomerulus under pressure, those four pressures that we talked about in the cardiovascular system, remember that? Capillary, osmotic, but the biggest driving force of how much plasma is filtered by the glomerulus is your systolic blood pressure. And your systolic blood pressure determines capillary fluid pressure. So capillary fluid pressure, and as you recall, it is going to tend to force water and the stuff that's in the plasma out of the glomerulus. And there is a little cap that surrounds the glomerulus of each nephron. This little cap is called the glomerular capsule. When I took ANP, before they had textbooks, and in the newspaper, there was an article that said they predict television one day. See, that's a joke trying to move towards the fact that I'm old. You know, just so you know, I hate me even worse today because I'm sick. Okay, so watch. That capillary fluid pressure is going to force the plasma of the blood from the glomerulus into what's called Bowman's capsule. And Bowman's capsule collects that plasma that was filtered by the glomerulus. That stuff that gets filtered by the glomerulus is called filtrate. So the stuff that got filtered by the glomerulus and then ends up in Bowman's capsule, so it's going to be water and stuff. These little dashes here represent stuff, and it's going to enter Bowman's capsule. Say yes. Now watch, this is really important. What is not filtered by the glomerulus into Bowman's capsule leaves the glomerulus through the efferent arterial. Efferent meaning away. Efferent. And then look, watch. Looky here. So this is kind of a bigger view of that little picture I just showed you. So you have the afferent arterial, yes. You got the glomerulus, then you have Bowman's capsule, this thing that looks like a praying mantis, and then you have the efferent arterial. And the efferent arterial takes what was not filtered by the glomerulus, and then it forms a network of capillaries that surround the yellow brick road. That network of capillaries that surrounds the yellow brick road is called the peritubular capillaries. And this is really important. The peritubular capillaries are where stuff that was filtered by the glomerulus and ends up in the yellow brick road, yes, that's where that stuff gets actively reabsorbed back into the blood. And I told you, I'll never forget it. It was a Wednesday, because I told you today, and today's Wednesday. Are you writing that down, anyone? Okay, good. That some things cannot be adequately filtered by the glomerulus. So they have to be actively secreted from the blood into the collecting tubules and peed out. Those guys are potassium and hydrogen, and of course our buddy, our pal, creatinine. Those have to be actively secreted. Are you with me, guys? Okay. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you and I'm going to explain to you each section of the nephron and where that stuff gets reabsorbed and why it's important. There are tons of drugs that affect the kidney directly, meaning they give you drugs that will prevent the kidney from doing something. You got me? So understanding where this stuff occurs is really important. Now, I'm not going to get into why it is. It's real complicated. This is just one time I'm asking you to take this on faith. All right? All right, ready? What's the osmolarity of the blood? 300. You got me? Now, as you can see, and for the most part, and please write this down because this is important, the beginning of most nephrons, so the glomerulus, they start in the cortex of the kidney. And as you can see, the yellow brick road, follow it, follow. It starts to dip into the medulla of the kidney. Tell me you got that. So, literally, and if you ever take anatomy classes where, like if you take anatomy class that's specifically on the kidney, which I'm probably sure many of you are probably already registered for, you can literally draw a line. You can literally draw a line straight across, starting in the cortex and moving deeper into the medulla. And as you do this, as you move from the cortex of the kidney to the medulla of the kidney, the osmolarity progressively goes up. So it started at 300, then it's going to move to 600, then it's going to move to 900, and then it's going to move to 1200. So as you move from the cortex of the kidney deeper into the medulla of the kidney, what is filtered by the glomerulus and ends up in the yellow brick road, as it travels the yellow brick road, it is seeing an environment that is saltier and saltier. It is tons of sodium and chloride are in the interstitial spaces between the peritubular capillaries and the collecting tubules. So what I'm trying to tell you is that as this stuff that was filtered by the glomerulus and ends up in the tubules, as that filtrate moves down deeper into the medulla of the kidney, it is seen an environment that has a higher and higher osmolarity. More stuff, less water. Tell me you got that. You're following this. And it's really maintained by three things: sodium, chloride, and urea. So urea is actually what helps maintain that really high osmolarity within the cortex and medulla of the kidney. So let's go back here for a second. I don't like this picture. I'm just too lazy to change it. I just don't like it. How many people don't like this picture too? Huh? Take a vote. I don't even know where I got it. You know what? I bet you I asked my kid to pull a picture off the internet of the kidney, a cross section. This is what he got me. What? Here's the glomerulus. Here's the little tubules. Tell me you got that. So here's the cortex of the kidney, and then you move deeper and deeper into the medulla of the kidney. And as you move deeper and deeper into the medulla of the kidney, that environment that filtrate is seen is a higher and higher osmolarity. Tell me you got that. That's beautiful. Okay. All right, I told you I'd be very general, right? And then we'll get a little more specific. Now watch. Write this down. What's the osmolarity of the blood that's going to be filtered by the glomerulus? So when it is filtered and is caught by Bowman's capsule, it's going to enter the first part of the collecting tubules. And the first part of the collecting tubules is what? The proximal convoluted tubules. Proximal because it is closest to the point of the origination of the glomerulus. And it's twisted. If you have twisted thoughts, like, I'm going to read the textbook today, you need help. It's called convoluted. So the proximal convoluted tubules is where the filtrate enters first. It makes perfect sense. Watch. Watch. When you clean a closet, right, and you know you're going to put your textbook back in that closet because you want it readily available, that's 2 in like 3 minutes. The stuff that you want to get back into the blood, you're not going to move it into your garage. You're going to keep it right there. Do you understand? So that you can put it back into the closet. So in the proximal convoluted tubules, approximately 70% of what was filtered gets reabsorbed back into the blood. Water, electrolytes, glucose, amino acids, are you with me? And it makes sense, yes? And a lot of these things have to be actively pumped back into the blood. So the kidney, in terms of metabolic activity, is way up there with other organs of your body that require a lot of energy. The kidneys, and specifically these tubules, the cells that make them up, they're loaded with mitochondria. Loaded. Because you have to actively pump a lot of this stuff back into the blood. Who's following this so far? And watch. Watch. If you lack blood flow to your brain, what happens to your brain? Right, it dies. If you lack blood flow and oxygen to your kidney, what does your kidney do? It dies. Are you writing that down? Now listen up, because this is true. When people be sick and their blood pressure be really low, and you can't maintain a mean arterial blood pressure of greater than 60, do you see how I'm relating? Not hating. The kidneys will begin to fail acutely because you can't deliver enough oxygen to make ATP to make the kidneys work properly. So they will go into acute renal failure. That's why somebody's blood pressure be really low, right? They ain't pumping good. They will have to temporarily go on dialysis to give the kidney a break. Do you understand this? How many people follow this? So watch. 70% of what was filtered by the glomerulus ends up in the proximal convoluted tubules. That 70% gets actively reabsorbed back into those peritubular capillaries. Are you with me? And a lot of it has to be actively pumped in, and one of the things that these cells that make up the proximal the convoluted tubules are loaded with are these pumps called the Sodiumpotassium pump. And for a swig off my Diet Mountain Dew and in my sickly condition, which you probably get, I think there's some Klebsiella right there, I see it. What does the sodium-potassium pump? I can't resist that. I just could not resist that. Oh, God. Okay, so watch. But this is the important part. The cells that make up the collecting tubules, right, the proximal convoluted tubules, the pump in those cells, this is really important, it will take 2 potassiums that was going to get peed into the blood. I'm sorry. Don't erase that. I'm still good. So you got your little sodium-potassium pump here. It's going to take 2 potassiums that were in the blood and 3 sodiums that we're going to get peed into the toilet, and it pumps out the potassium into the toilet and pumps in the sodium into the blood. And what follows sodium by osmosis? Water. So this sodium-potassium pump is the driving force for reabsorbing electrolytes and water. And know this, tattoo this someplace. How about on the back of your knee? That's a new place. The only way that you can get potassium out of the blood is to pump it out. And what pumps potassium out of the blood and into the turlet? The sodium-potassium pump. And because it's ATP dependent, you need oxygen to make that ATP. So anything that impairs delivery of oxygen to the nephron of the kidney is going to impair your ability to pump potassium out of the blood. Do you see how this works? Do you see this? This will come back and take a big huge chunk right out of your fatty acid in clinical. They get a lot really involved in the kidney. I'm like, damn, I didn't have to know that. Well, I probably did in nursing school, but I'm like, forget it. I'll just guess. Who's with me so far? All right. Now, write this down. I'm going to say it real slow. 70% of the stuff that was filtered by the glomerulus that ends up in the proximal convoluted tubules gets reabsorbed back into the blood. And it does so isoosmotically. I know, somebody stop me. Can I tell you what that means? Iso equal, osmotic, osmotic. So watch. What was the osmolarity of the filtrate? When it gets through the yellow brick road, the proximal convoluted tubules, that osmolarity is still 300. That's what it means, isoosmotically. 70% of the stuff got reabsorbed back into the blood, but so did 70% of the water. So as you increase the amount of stuff, you are going to bring in back into the blood equal amounts of water. So the osmolarity is unchanged. Say yes. Guys? Okay, now watch. As you can see, the proximal convoluted tubules, they're kind of tubby. Look. Right? They're tubby tubules. And then you can see that they start to thin out and they dive deeper and deeper into the medulla of the kidney. Are you with me? Then they make a little turn and they come back up. This little area here, the little thin loop here, is called the loop of Don Henley. Can I tell you a story about that? 3 years ago, I had a student sit right there. She was taking the kidney quiz, right? And she's a night class, and it's like going on 9 o'clock. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on? She goes, Tim, can I ask you something? You don't have to tell me. But I'm trying to remember the name of the loop of Henley, and I can't remember it. She thought it was actually the loop of Don Henley. The loop of Don Henley. What? I can read Maggie's mind over there. You know what she's thinking? I can't believe I actually paid money for this class. Okay, this is important. Now watch. In the loop of Don Henley, you got me? Stuff will get reabsorbed and water will get reabsorbed. I'll explain more about that as we move. You got me? Now watch. Then, what happens to the loop of Don Henley as it starts moving up? What happens to it? It gets tubby again. This is called the thickened portion of the loop of Don Henley. You know how some people like thin people, other people like thick people. Some people like short people. Some people like tall people. And somebody's been sleeping in my bed. Okay, so watch. Better write this down. In the thickened portion of the ascending limb of the loop of Don Henley, this is where electrolytes are actively pumped back into the blood. You got me? Then, watch it. Then you have another twisted, disgusting, despicable yellow brick road. And because it's farther away from the point of attachment of the glomerulus, what's it called? It's called the distal convoluted tubules. Oh, yeah. And in the distal convoluted tubules, this is where some potassium gets secreted, some hydrogens get secreted. Yep. And this is where you get rid of a lot of drugs. So, has anybody doing any drugs like before class? Maggie, you have? What were you doing? You can't say? Okay. Was it illegal? All right. This is recorded, just so you know. Maggie's doing illegal drugs. Now, here's the thing. I would never tell anyone, as long as you share. Okay, so watch. This is really important. In the distal convoluted tubules, this is where hormones have a profound effect. And the hormones that affect the distal convoluted tubules are, number one, aldosterone. Number two, ADH, anti-diuretic hormone. And number three, ANP, atrial natriuretic peptide. Are you with me? Now, let me give you a little introduction here. And again, the body does stuff that makes sense, so watch it. Watch it. ANP, atrial natriuretic peptide, that is released by specialized cells in your right atrium. If you get this right, swig off my Diet Mountain Dew, plus with this clippy thing, you can pinch my nose with it really hard. Where does all venous blood enter the heart? Guess. Get it right. Maggie, get it right. What is it? That was so softly said, but I heard it. It's the right atrium. I didn't hear that. That's probably good, right? In the right atrium. Say yes. Okay? And these specialized cells, you're not going to believe this. They respond to stretch. When you're going to stretch your right atrium? When you increase venous return preload. Tell me you got that. I struggled with this last semester. What does a diuretic mean? What does diuresis mean? No, what does the word actually mean? Diuresis means water running through you. So what does a diuretic do? Makes water run through you. Diarrhea. What's that? That's poop running through you like a fire hose. Tell me you got that. Okay. So, watch. What does natriuretic mean? It naturally runs through you. Oh, God. Atrial natriuretic peptide prevents the distal convoluted tubules from reabsorbing sodium back into the blood. Atrial natriuretic peptide is the only hormone in your body that lowers your blood pressure. All the other hormones raise it. Some drugs will raise your blood pressure. Yeah, you bet, yeah. Right. Cuckoo for Dopo Puffs. All right, I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to write this down. And it has something to do with the sodium-potassium pump. Again, it's never leaving you. That pump is just going to, you'll wake up in the middle of the night thinking the sodium-potassium pump is breaking into your house. And going to steal your textbook. In that case, you go back to bed or help them find it. Okay, here we go. Where's aldosterone released from? Better get this right. Better get this right. That's right. That's the cortex of the kidney. And aldosterone, watch, does the opposite of ANP. Oh. So, watch. ANP is released when your blood volume is high, right? When is aldosterone released? When it's low. And when your blood volume is low, what happens to your blood pressure? It goes down. So aldosterone is released when your blood pressure is low. Yay! Are you with me? And you got anti-diuretic hormone. An anti-diuretic hormone. Where's it released from? Ooh, you better get this. You better get this. It's the posterior pituitary. And you better write this down, better not pout. Antidiuretic hormone is released when there is increased osmolarity. That means, watch. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Oh. How do you increase your osmolarity? What are the two ways you can increase your osmolarity? That's right. You could increase the stuff and keep the water the same, or you can keep the stuff the same and decrease the water. That's how you increase your osmolarity. Say yes. All right, let's go back to our nephron. Did you miss it? Watch. whatever is left over after you filter, reabsorb, and secrete ends up in the collecting ducts. And for the most part, the collecting ducts are impermeable to everything. They're impermeable to stuff and water. But watch. Now look, and again, the body doing stuff that makes sense. I still don't like this picture. You know what I'm going to do? No, I'm going to force myself to look at it until I like it. Watch. Now get this, guys. Here's the collecting ducts. The collecting ducts start out in the cortex and they move where? Well, just follow it. They move into the medulla. What happens to the osmolarity of the surrounding tissue in the kidney as you move deeper into the medulla? The osmolarity goes up. Say yes. So watch. If you're bleeding your own blood, do you want to be peeing a lot? Right? Blood spurtulating out of here. Well, hold up, I got to take a leak. Do you want that to happen? No. So, watch. The only way that you can reabsorb water in the collecting tubules is with the hormone, anti-diuretic hormone. And what anti-diuretic hormone does is it will actually stimulate the cells that make up the collecting ducts, and it will cause them to insert water channels into those cells. Water channels have a special name. They're called water channels. They're called aquaporins. Aqua, water, porin, porous. Something. Tell me you got that. So these little water channels, these little aquaporins, will allow water that was going to get peed into the toilet to get reabsorbed back into the blood. Tell me you got that. Another name, you better write this down. Another name for anti-diuretic hormone is Felipe. So if you see Felipe on a chart, you're talking ADH all day. It's called vasopressin. Vasopressin. What does vas mean? Vessel. What does pressin mean? Pressure, right? So vasopressin increases your blood pressure. So what does ADH do to your blood pressure? It increases it. So watch it. You're going to get this, and I'm going to be proud of you. Here we go. You got your ADH here, and you got your aldosterone. Those two, generically speaking, increase blood pressure. Then you got on the other side, you got atrial natriuretic peptide. What does that do to your blood pressure? It lowers it. So ADH and aldosterone inhibit the release of ANP. And when ANP is around, that inhibits the release of aldosterone and ADH. Because it's like having insulin and glucagon in the blood at the same time. Don't make sense. That's how it works. Who's with me? You following this?
What do you give it to?
They give them vasopressin. That's the name of the drug. that give them antidiuretic hormone. So there are conditions we'll learn about. You'll learn about these in clinical. I ain't got time. You know why? I have to take a swig off my Diet Mountain Dew. I don't take too much time. There's two conditions, disease states that affect antidiuretic hormone. One is you ain't got no antidiuretic hormone. The other one is you got too much. Are you writing that down? If you ain't got no antidiuretic hormone, you got diabetes insipidus. Have you ever heard of diabetes insipidus? Who has? All right, what do you want from me? Oh, big wow. You should have gone to nursing school. These people don't have any diuretic hormone. And you better write this down, better not pout. Antidiuretic hormone only affects water. So they are peeing out pure water. Are you with me? And then the other one is called syndrome of inappropriate ADH. You know what? They should come up with a better name than this. This is where you have too much ADH. So you are reabsorbing pure water. Tell me you're following this. All right? Don't aldosterone sound like a Western movie? Right? Like Harry Belafonte and John Wayne in Aldosterone. I had like 0 sleep last night. I am punchy. Can you tell? Plus my neck hurts right here. Probably got meningitis. Yeah. I'll be dead by 11:30. Okay. Those are the hormones. Say, yeah, you followed this. Okay, here we go. Now I'm going to get a little more specific. Are you ready? Okay. That Sodiumpotassium pump. Oh! See, I raced too fast. Okay, while this is waiting, guess where the little wheel's going to end up? Are you guessing? It ended up right there. These computers want. I bet you guys, you look at my files and all that stuff and how disorganized they are. Why don't you organize those things? Yeah, well, big wow. Okay, here we go. Wait, I got to erase slowly. Okay, here we go. Ready? Great. Okay, there's a concept that you got to become familiar with. It's called GFR, or glomerular filtration rate. And at minimum, at minimum, you need about 30 milliliters per minute to be filtered by the glomerulus. That's just to adequately filter your blood. Now, normal glomerular filtration rate is about 120 milliliters per minute. So with a drop in blood pressure, that could affect glomerular filtration rate, right? Okay, so watch. I'm going to blow this up, right? I'm going to show you this. Remember, these are made of muscle. And what can muscle do? It can contract and relax. Now, think about this for a minute. And again, you know, I'm asking you to start putting some stuff together. The sympathetic nervous system innervates the afferent arterial. The sympathetic nervous system innervates the afferent arterial. And as you can see, look at the diameter of the afferent arterial and look at the diameter of the efferent arterial. Which has more resistance? The efferent. So as blood from the renal artery is coming into the glomerulus, that resistance in the efferent arterial is going to build up pressure. Remember, if you increase resistance by making the artery smaller, you are going to increase pressure. That is going to increase the amount of filtrate that enters Bowman's capsule. Are you following this? Are you following this? So now watch. The sympathetic nervous system innervates the afferent arterial. If you get this right, I will be so proud of you, and I will give you a ball of capillaries. Which artery has more resistance, A or 2? Good. So where does arterial blood always go? The path of least resistance. Tell me you got that. So when you are bleeding your own blood, do you want to be making a lot of urine? No, you don't. So the sympathetic nervous system will take the afferent arterial and it will constrict it. Do you see this? And when you constrict this, you make the opening smaller. So blood is diverted away from your kidney to fuel and supply the other parts of your body. That's why another reason your urine output drops when you're bleeding. Do you see this? Now watch. You ain't bleeding your blood no more. You're drinking a bunch of water. What's going to happen to your blood volume? Go up, right? What's going to happen to pressure in the glomerulus? What's going to happen to pressure in the glomerulus? It's going to go up. And as pressure goes up, the afferent arterial dilates a little bit. That means more blood can go there so that you filter more of the plasma of the blood to get rid of that excess fluid you just took in. Yeah. Say yes. You followed this. Here we go. When you filter the plasma of the blood, it enters the proximal convoluted tubules. Is that correct? 70% of that stuff is absorbed isoosmotically. Glucose, amino acids, water, electrolytes, say yeah. And because a lot of it is actively pumped in, and it's actively pumped in by using ATP to run the sodium-potassium pump. Say yeah. And when it gets down to the end of the proximal convoluted tubules, what is the osmolarity of that filtrate? 300. Then, if you recall, right, what's going to happen to the osmolarity as you go deeper and deeper into the medulla of the kidney? It gets higher. So now it's 600, 900, 1200. That's a lot. What's the osmolarity of the filtrate? 300. You better write this down. In the descending loop of the limb of Don Henley, the descending limb of the loop of Don Henley. In the descending limb of the loop of Don Henley, the only thing that can get reabsorbed is water. And where does water always move? Low what? Low osmolarity to high. So what's the osmolarity of this filtrate? It's 300. So where's the water going to move as it enters the descending limb of the loop of Don Henley? It's going to move from the filtrate back into the blood. This is how water gets reabsorbed. And it's done so by osmosis. And if you didn't know about osmosis and osmolarity, you'd be like, what you talking about, Willis? Do you see? I got a plan for your life. And as it moves down, more and more water gets reabsorbed until the osmolarity of the filtrate is equal to the osmolarity of the peritubular capillaries. So when it comes down to the little bend on the loop of Don Henley, it is very, very concentrated. Say yes. Now, it's going to stop at Paul Bunyan Restaurant and have breakfast, and then it's going to move up the ascending limb. What happens to the osmolarity as you move up the ascending limb? It goes down. You better write this down. Better not pout. The only thing that is you can reabsorb in the ascending limb is solute, electrolytes. Water is impermeable in the ascending limb. So as you reabsorb electrolytes, sodium, potassium, chloride, back into the blood, what's going to happen to the osmolarity of that filtrate? It will go. You're not right? You're absorbing stuff. So the amount of solute goes down, the water stays the same, so the osmolarity goes down. Say yes. Until it's back to its 300 milliosmoles. Now here's the important piece. Now you're getting to the thickened portion of the ascending limb. And in the thickened portion of the ascending limb, electrolytes are actively pumped back into the blood. And the three electrolytes that are actively pumped back into the blood are sodium, potassium, and chloride. And you better write this down. In the thickened portion of the ascending limb, these are reabsorbed together. 1 sodium, 1 potassium, and 2 chloride. And a partridge in a pear tree. And the reason it's 2 chloride is you have to maintain the law of electroneutrality. Who's with me? Now watch. If you reabsorb sodium back into the blood, what's going to follow? What's going to happen to your blood volume? Blood pressure, stretch. I can't even do it. So watch. There's a drug called Lasix. You ever hear of Lasix? What's that? Lasix. That's also that eye surgery to help you see better. They give you that medicine and it makes you pee and then you see better. Watch. In the thickened portion of the ascending limb, to reabsorb sodium, you have to reabsorb potassium and chloride. Do you got that? Lasix prevents you from reabsorbing chloride. If you can't reabsorb chloride back into the blood, what has to stay with it? Sodium and potassium. All three of these will not get reabsorbed back into the blood. And if you don't reabsorb sodium back into the blood, what will not follow? So sodium, potassium, and chloride, along with a bunch of water, remain in the collecting tubules. And what do you pee out? Sodium, potassium, chloride, and water. That's how Lasix works. And because it works in the thickened portion of the ascending limb of the loop of Don Henley, it's called a loop diuretic. Itzel. How many people will explain that to you? Right. You got to read that on your own. Like, what is this guy talking about? Willis. Right here. Bad voice, not feeling good, and my neck hurts right here. Bam. I just killed that. That's why when you give Lasix, you have to monitor people's potassium level. Potassium, hard to find in food. Salt, look, there's probably salt right there on this table. Salt's everywhere. Potassium, hard to find. Say yeah. Watch. Can I just show you something just real quick? And Itzel, you can tell, you can verify whether or not that you need to know this. All right. There's a drug out there called hydrochlorothiazide. Have you ever heard of that? You've heard of hydrochlorothiazide? It's a real kind of a weak diuretics for giving people who their blood pressure is a little high, right? That works in the distal convoluted tubules. And essentially, it prevents the reabsorption of sodium. But not a lot of sodium is reabsorbed in the distal convoluted tubules, so the diuretic effect is relatively low. This is what I wanted to tell you. Hydrochlorothiazide is secreted by the kidneys into the urine so that you can pee it out. It competes with uric acid for secretion, getting it into the urine. You following? If you're taking hydrochlorothiazide, are you going to be able to get rid of uric acid normally? What's going to happen to the uric acid in your blood? And uric acid crystallizes and forms a precipitate. Ain't that great? And you will get gout. That's why hydrochlorothiazide, one of the side effects is gout. Do they expect you to know that?
Yeah, they expect you to know, like, what they have a diuretic and how do they work, whether they're affecting very affecting.
Yeah. I could explain that to you, but I don't have time. I got to take another drink out of my Diet Mountain Dew. I put on YouTube, because I like you guys, as far as you know. There's a video on how the different diuretics work, their mechanism of action. And I did that while I was at home, right sick, and my neck hurting right here. Tell me. Yeah, it'll come up. Okay, so watch. In the distal convoluted tubules, right, distal convoluted tubules, this is where hormones take effect. Also, in the distal convoluted tubules, this is where a lot of medications are secreted, gotten rid of. Small amounts of electrolytes are absorbed there, but this is really the place where you get rid of potassium and you get rid of hydrogen ions in the blood. And hormones can affect that. I'll show you. And then whatever's left over after you have filtered, reabsorbed, and secreted ends up in the collecting ducts, and the collecting ducts then dump their urine into the calyx of the kidney, right here. There you go, little collecting duct into the calyx, and then boom, bam, into the turlet. Tell me you got that. Does that make sense? All right. Okay, watch. Just so you know, the structure of the nephron, and you're going to explain each part of the nephron and what it does. That's going to be on the kidney quiz. You got me? And the hormones and how they affect the kidney, that's going to be on there too. So I'm telling you that up front, right? So you better study that and don't be surprised when you see it. Yeah? Okay, here we go. Watch. I'm going to explain to you now the renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system. You got me? What artery carries blood towards the glomerulus? The afferent arterial. Here we go. This is a blown up version of the juxtaglomerular apparatus. I'm going to simplify it for you. Say yes. Okay. As you can see, in the afferent arterial, right, so you got the glomerulus and Bowman's capsule, so I'll give you a little reference as to where you're at. Surrounding the afferent arterial are these little teal-colored cells called juxtaglomerular cells. And these things respond to stretch. You got me? And really what they do is they monitor blood pressure. So if there is a drop in blood pressure throughout your body, who cares why, but there's a drop in your blood pressure, that is going to be transmitted, that drop in blood pressure, to the afferent arterial. And when that happens, think of the afferent arterial like a little bike tire, right? It deflates. So when the afferent arterial deflates, these little juxtaglomerular cells are attached to it, so as the bike tire deflates, it's going to stretch those juxtaglomerular cells, and those juxtaglomerular cells are going to release an enzyme called renin. Renin's an enzyme. What do enzymes do? They catalyze chemical reactions. Ain't that right? You better write this down. Continually produced and in its inactive form is a compound that's produced by the liver called angiotensinogen. Anything with gen after it is inactive. But what do you have now floating in your blood? Renin. Why was renin released? Because your blood pressure dropped. What do you think renin is going to help do? It's going to raise your blood pressure. And this is how it does it. Continually produced by the liver, and it's in an active form, is angiotensinogen. You now have increased amounts of renin because there was a drop in blood pressure. Renin then is going to catalyze the chemical reaction of angiotensinogen to the active form, angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 circulates in your blood for about 30 minutes. And angiotensin 1 is a mild arterial vasoconstrictor. So it's going to take arteries throughout your entire body that were like this and constrict them down. So what's going to happen to resistance to arterial blood flow? It will go. And that will increase your systolic blood pressure to maintain Q. You got me? Now, if that corrects everything, then angiotensin 1 goes away. No more release of renin, you're straight. But if things start going south for you, then write this down. Angiotensin 1, how long does it live? 30 minutes. In the lining of the pulmonary capillaries, you have another enzyme called ACE. ACE is the enzyme your ma said stay away from. Harley Softail. He's a welder in Milwaukee. Got 2 kids and he doesn't even pay child support. And he smokes Marlboro Light Menthol 100s in a box. ACE stands for angiotensin converting enzyme. And it takes the mild vasoconstricting angiotensin 1 and converts it to the much more powerful angiotensin 2. And angiotensin 2 does two things in one. Angiotensin 2 is a massive arterial vasoconstrictor. It really cranks on them arteries. Boom. Boom. So what happens? The resistance to arterial blood flow goes up. To maintain Q, your systolic blood pressure goes up. You got me? But probably the most powerful and most important of the effects of angiotensin 2 are in the cells that make up the adrenal cortex. And if you recall, I told you that in order for a chemical to exert its effect, one of the ways that it does that is by binding to specific receptors. So on the cells that make up the adrenal cortex, you have angiotensin 2 receptors. And when angiotensin 2 binds to angiotensin 2 receptors, it is going to cause the cells of the adrenal cortex to release into the blood the Western movie starring Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. and Jack Palance, the hormone aldosterone. Now in your book, that book, Dana, aldosterone is referred to as a mineral corticoid. It's a steroid hormone, but it affects sodium and potassium Who's following this so far? Now watch. Better write this down. Better not pout. Embedded in the cells that make up the distal convoluted tubules, there is a pump called the sodium-potassium pump. And what does the sodium-potassium pump? That's going to be an extra credit question. So watch. Better write this down. Aldosterone stimulates the sodium-potassium pump in the distal convoluted tubules. And it will take 3 sodiums that we're going to get peed into the toilet and pump them back into the blood. And at the same time, take 2 potassiums and pump them into the collecting tubules to get peed out. So when you bring sodium back into the blood, water's going to follow by osmosis. So what's going to happen to the person's blood volume? Goes up. What happens to venous retard? What happens to the stretch? And their blood pressure goes up. So the most powerful of the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism is the effect of aldosterone. And the effects of aldosterone, when this system is initiated in a big way, can last for weeks, sometimes months. Now watch, I'm going to give you a little clinical thing here for you. Because you guys, did I tell you that whether you do good in this class or bad, I've decided not to care. All I know is that this is exactly what you need. And I gave it to you. So watch. There's a drug called aldactone. You've heard of it? Spironolactone. You've heard of that? That inhibits the effects of aldosterone in the distal convoluted tubules. And because it affects the sodium-potassium pump, it spares potassium. That's why spironolactone is a potassium-sparing diuretic for the crowd. Okay. You guys can ambulate home. We did real good. Oh, wait, one more thing. Just one more thing. If you don't want to listen to this, you could go. But it's really good. It'll come back. I guarantee it. And when I see you guys struggling in clinical, you know what I'm going to say? I told you so. So tell them they need to know this. Do they need to know this? Yeah, I know. That class. You learn about drugs in that class, I think. Yep. Okay, watch. One of the problems... Oh, I didn't go over ACE inhibitors. Forget it. We'll do it next time. We will. It's too long. Go home. Turn in your multiple gas. If you took the multiple gas, cardiovascular, midterm, turn it in. Right up here. Right on those textbooks that are brand new, that nobody reads. Do me a favor. If you want me to go over that with you, then come in early on Monday and I'll go over that stuff with you. All right, there you go. Thank you.